How's it going, everybody? It's Prod here, and welcome all back to another video talking about some Night Rain. Today, I wanted to do almost like a fantasy draft pick of what I would consider some of my favorite bosses in the entirety of the Souls series, and possibly introducing them into Night Rain, especially considering we have so many bosses from the previous games in Night Rain already. I wanted to make a video talking about which I would have if I had my pick of the litter. But I am going to be setting a few rules, because if I didn't, then you guys would just have 10 different Dark Souls 3 bosses thrown into Night Rain. So what I'm going to be doing is picking one boss from every single game and DLC. And feel free to play along with me as well. If you guys have any bosses you would like to see, feel free to leave the exact same format that I have in the comment section down below. One from a game, one from a DLC. So, of course, we're going to start off on Dark Souls 1. We are going to be leaving out the ones that pretty much have no chance to ever make it into Night Rain. Talking about Bloodborne, Demon Souls. These games are owned by Sony, so there's just no way you guys are going to see them in Night Rain unless they have some type of crazy contract that they pulled together. But in reality, I just don't think it's possible. So we have a few actually already from Dark Souls 1. Of course, we see the Centipede Demon. The Gaping Dragon is another cool one that we see. Of course, we have even skins with Artorias' skin. Now keep in mind, these would most likely be day 2, maybe day 1 bosses as well, which is kind of where it gets tricky, right? Because it can't really be Night Lords, since every single Night Lord they have is a new boss. So these would have to be exclusive for day 1, day 2. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, man, if they had this boss in like a day 1 or day 2, they'd take out 90% of the players, which is absolutely right. Because my first pick for day 2 boss is Ornstein and Smough. Ornstein and goddamn Smough. If I had my choice for Dark Souls 1, I think this is where I would start. I think they're so freaking insane, so iconic for Dark Souls 1. And like I said, man, it would be like From Software just holding a shotgun over a fish in a barrel and basically seeing how many people they end up taking out before the main Night Lord. But goddamn it, I would love to see them back with some new moves. And hell, you could even have varieties of them too. You could have second phase Ornstein or second phase Smough for different days and stuff like that. I think these would be a really cool one to bring back, and I would love to see them. But there's so many good choices, honestly. Like, you can have as well something like Chaos Witch Quelaag is one that I know a lot of people consider one of the favorites. You know, you got Crossbreed Priscilla. All good possibilities, and there's so many to pick from, but I'm going to go with Ornstein and Smough. Now onto the DLC. This is kind of where it gets a little bit more tricky, because as much as I would love an Artorias, as much as I would love a Manus, Artorias seems like the more difficult one that they probably wouldn't add, especially since we already have the Artorias skin for Wilder. I don't know if they would put the boss himself. If they would, I would absolutely say Artorias, but it seems less likely. Manus would be amazing, but he kind of is in there already with the Dark Drift Knight having that crazy ass Manus hand. At least that's what that reminds me of. So my choice for the DLC is going to be Kalameet. I know how people feel about dragons, but honestly, Kalameet is a pretty fun dragon. He's got fun movesets, and with the improved hitboxes of Elden Ring, I think he could be awesome with some new moves. And just like Ornstein and Smough, this guy would absolutely demolish so many people before they get to the final Night Lord. I honestly think it would be hilarious. So we'll go with Kalameet for the Dark Souls 1 DLC. On to Dark Souls 2, probably the biggest list out of any of the Souls games, mainly because its main game contains something like 30 bosses, plus the DLC is like 50 bosses altogether. So we're going to stick to, of course, first the main game. And of course, my choice is going to be the Royal Rat Vanguard. I'm kidding, obviously. It's going to have to be Dark Lurker. Dark Lurker in Elden Ring, Night Rain would be insane. Updated graphics. He has some of the most varied moveset in all of the Souls series. Him being able to turn himself into multiple versions of himself, shoot lasers and bombs, easily would be probably much scarier than a lot of the damn Night Lords that we have in Night Rain right now. He'd probably solo a couple of them. And as terrifying as he would be, again, this is the dream pick, right? So Dark Lurker is going to be my choice for Dark Souls 2's main game. Next, we got the DLCs. Now, for the first DLC, The Crown of the Sunken King, probably the weakest offerings from the boss fights in my opinion from Dark Souls 2's DLCs, and my choice is going to have to be Elana, the Squalid Queen. Interesting moves, able to summon a couple of different enemies. I feel like she'd actually make a pretty damn good day 1 boss, if I'm being completely honest. Not too strong, but also not too weak either. I think she'd fit right in there. She'd be one of the good ones. One of the few that I think would be my pick for like a good day 1 boss. DLC 2 is a little tougher. These are some monsters. Of course, we can cut out the Smelter Demon, considering we have the Smelter Demon already as a boss in NIGHTREIGN. So it's a fight between Fume Knight and Sir Alon, 2 fan favorites from the Dark Souls 2 days, and my choice is gonna have to be the Fume Knight. One of the scariest bosses in the history of Souls games. Hits like an absolute tank. Phase 2 is one of the most terrifying freaking things ever, but seeing him brought back into the world of the modern day would just bring a tear to my goddamn eye. And it's hard too, because Sir Alon is also one of my favorite bosses, and especially if they had the same situation where they brought back his animation where if you kill him without taking any damage, he basically seppukus at the end. Oh, it would make it even better. I feel like a lot of people's choice is going to be this guy just for that reason, but seeing 80% of teams fall to Fume Knight would be honestly pretty goddamn hilarious. And for the third and final DLC, it's my favorite boss in all of Dark Souls 2. And it doesn't even have to be said, but it's of course the Ivory King. Especially, by the way, if they bring back his entrance the exact same way he does it in Dark Souls 2, there'd be a goddamn tear rolling down my eye every single time that this guy comes up. Both because I love him so much and he's fun to fight, and also because he is an absolute demon, terrifying monster. And I would probably hate to see him because I know, god damn it, this run's gonna end here, isn't it? Most of the freaking time. First, of course, we're gonna start with the main game of Dark Souls 3. Of course, we already have a few Dark Souls 3 bosses that make an appearance in NIGHTREIGN, especially what probably would have been my main pick for the main game, which is the Nameless King. I don't know if you guys know this, but the dancer's in NIGHTREIGN, and I've only seen her once in 40 hours of playing, so she is really goddamn rare. So the boss I'm gonna have to go with to bring back to Elden Ring NIGHTREIGN to modern times would have to be the Soul of Cinder. To see this guy brought back to the updated graphics and seeing him maybe even use all the same spells that he does already use, you could even make an argument that he would use new spells and stuff, but to see kind of like the old lightning stake from Dark Souls 1 and see some of the older Dark Souls 3 spells would be absolutely beautiful. And again, this guy fits right in with a lot of bosses in Elden Ring. He's tanky, 2 phases. I don't know if they would bring back 2 phases. I'm gonna be honest, maybe don't make it a 2-phase boss, especially for day 2. But seeing him flip about a lot faster than he was in Dark Souls 3 to kind of update him to Elden Ring speed, honestly, it'd be terrifying. Let's just be real, it'd be absolutely terrifying, but really cool. So of course, the Soul of Cinder has to be my pick for the main game of Dark Souls 3. And I don't even think it has to be said which boss we would pick for Dark Souls 3's first DLC. It has to be Frida. And again, it might be a little difficult because we got the Frida skin in NIGHTREIGN already, so I exactly don't know how that would work. But she could again be another boss that would legitimately be a Night Lord herself. One of the few 3-phase bosses in the entire Souls series. Super cool transformation. One of the coolest psych outs that you have, at least with my experience when I first fought her, and would most likely end up being one of the most difficult bosses in all of NIGHTREIGN, including the Night Lords, because man, this girl in Dark Souls 3 still puts up a hell of a fight. Although you can get some good backstabs in there. Just gotta make sure you bring her her whole player model up to modern graphics. If you catch my drift, my dark drift to be specific. Now we're on a really hard territory right now, because damn it, you can't really go wrong with a lot of these bosses. Let's just go ahead and ignore Half-Light. throw his ass in the dumpster. Not because he's a bad boss, because he's a hell of a boss. You know what? He'd take out 100% of the players. Nobody would ever get past him if he comes out as a Night 2 boss. You can kind of make an argument for every single boss here. The Demon Princes, again, would be another dual boss into really difficult Demon Prince boss. Midir is probably one of the most legendary bosses in all of Dark Souls 3, whose move is like a massive inspiration for one of the coolest bosses in Elden Ring already, with Placidus Axe's whole laser beam. At least I'd imagine it would be, considering it, you know, him and Midir's laser beam are very similar. Midir's is still scarier though. And probably one of the greatest bosses ever made in video game history, Gale. Honestly, Gale would make an amazing freaking Night Lord. I think obviously the boss arena already kind of looks like the era you fight Gale in. So let's just say, right, theoretically, if they end up making Gale into a Night Lord for day 2, as terrifying as it would be, I'd probably have to go with Midir. The spectacle that we'd have if we saw Midir in action in Elden Ring. Oh my god. And I hate dragon bosses. Listen, I hate him more than anybody, but there's something about Midir and just like his style, even though I think he'd make probably an impossible boss considering how much he flies and runs around, you'd have to have the biggest day 2 arena ever. He'd be falling off and running away into the goddamn storm so often that he would most likely be annoying, but seeing our baby boy Midir brought back to modern day graphics would be so freaking sick. I'd have to go with him as my main pick for Dark Souls 3. And now we've reached the final on the list, and I wanted to include Elden Ring in here because again, there's still so many bosses that are in Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree that could be in NIGHTREIGN and could potentially get added at a later date. I do wonder, by the way, what was the influence for some of the bosses that they chose? I wonder why they chose like some of the specific bosses they do. Obviously I can understand why like some day 2 bosses are there, kind of like the Draconic Tree Sentinel, where they're more like mini bosses, but I do wonder what the choice of that was. And for the main game of Elden Ring, I'm gonna go with Malenia. I have no idea how this would work, but seeing the reaction of the internet to seeing Malenia return as like a day 2 boss and people running into her for the first time, I think you'd see a big drop off on the player base of Elden Ring. And for real, like, she's a fucking hard boss, as much as people still want to say like, I could solo Malenia with my hands tied behind my back and my mouth appropriately placed on a man's head. She's a hard fucking boss. You know, there's a reason why the legend of Malenia still exists and so many people still talk about her. I still struggle with her quite a bit. So I would choose her to come back and just rock everybody's shit again. I was really close to choosing Radahn because I love Radahn so much again, especially if we have the final version of Radahn, but I won't pick him for Shadow of the Erdtree. And my final choice and final boss to be brought back is Baal, the Dread. There's something about Baal. I've only really fought him about twice. This guy would be the absolute destroyer of NIGHTREIGN, if I'm being completely honest, along with Malenia, I think, but I think more so Baal. I don't think he would make like a good day 2 boss, but I had somebody on Twitter just have just the most amazing ideas. So imagine this, right? Instead of making him like a day 2 boss, how about make him a kind of like calamity that appears? Sort of like the volcano that you have show up, some of these rifts that show up, the mountain, the city. Have a Baal the Dread calamity show up. Have there be a mountain of rock that appears, and at the end of it you have Baal the Dread up there, and he's constantly causing problems. I want him to constantly be causing issues. I want you to be able to see him flying around the map of NIGHTREIGN and going, alright, Baal's over there, we can't go over there in this direction, so let's stick to here. Have him fly around, randomly just drop down and shoot his crazy ass fucking laser beams. I wouldn't say have it do as much damage as it normally does, because then people would just randomly be getting one shot out of nowhere, which would be funny, gonna be honest, but also very annoying if you're like 2 days into Elden Ring NIGHTREIGN, and then you just die because a random out of nowhere Bale the Dread lands on you. No, that would actually be kind of funny. Maybe that should happen. But yeah, I like the idea of like being able to look up or look down somewhere at a, let's just say in a crater, kind of the way you have the volcano now, and you look down and just Bale's down there causing issues, shooting off his laser beam, screaming, getting angry. Hell, you could even have a freaking quest where you randomly run into Egon and he goes, there's this fucking dragon down there, I'm gonna go fight him, you wanna come with me? And then all of a sudden you're following Egon into a mountaintop of rock. And then of course Iron Eye would get a dirty underwear that would be Egon's skin, so that would be just an extra bonus. But that is my list. 4 bosses that I would love to see come back from the previous games that we don't already have in NIGHTREIGN. And hey, maybe they take some of these ideas and some of these bosses for the DLCs. I would love that. But thank you if you made it this far, and if you watched the whole thing, I appreciate it very much. Feel free to, again, leave your own in the comment section down below. Maybe as well in like a week I'll see all the comments and I'll end up choosing like the top 3 most mentioned names, and I'll like post them somewhere on like Twitter or the YouTube community section just to see which one were the most popular picks from everybody in the community. Anyways, leave a like if you enjoyed. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye everybody.